Welcome back to the Cinebros podcast. Got Luke and Ray here with me today. Luke, Ray, say hello.
Hello. What is up?
Luke, you've turned into Frank Sinatra on me.
I sure did.
All right, guys, what are you going to be debating today?
Ray, do you want to tell him?
Sure, I'll tell everybody. Today, Luke and I will be debating the original. Is it the original one that we're debating?
Yeah.
The first one that ever came out, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And we'll have a great moderator in Tyler.
Yes, thank you very much. Now, which one of you is on which side?
Well, I don't think this movie is amazing, but there's a lot of great stuff in it. So I think this movie is pretty good.
And Ray?
I, on the other hand, think that the movie is complete, utter garbage. Definitely, I've maybe said this before on the show, but this really is probably the worst movie I've ever seen.
Hot take.
Hot take, yes.
All right, and we're going to jump right into it. If you haven't watched the show before, there are going to be 5 rounds to this debate. There's going to be an opening argument, followed by round 1, which is the writing, or round 2, the directing, and round 3, the acting, and finally we're going to have a closing argument. At the end of the 5 rounds, I will come back and declare a winner for each round, and of course, the winner of the actual debate. So we're going to jump right into the opening argument. And if you guys don't mind, Ray, I would really like to hear your side first, because I think it'll be entertaining.
Same.
Cool. I wanted to start anyway, yeah. So I saw this movie one time, and I was actually, I had a good opportunity of getting to go see it in theaters. With it being an older movie and me being a younger person, I obviously didn't get to see it in theaters before. So I went to see this movie with 2 of my friends. 2 of my friends who also really enjoy watching movies. Especially scary movies. This is supposed to be a really classic scary movie, and going into it, we all had those expectations. And as we sat there and watched the movie, the entire time we were from the opening, we were just we were laughing at how bad it was. It was laughable, literally. And I think we spent the entire movie just laughing at it. And there were other people in there with us, and it's not like we were being disrespectful to the other people in the theater, because the other people in the theater were laughing at how bad it was too. And the thing I'll say about this movie, it was probably monumental for the time that it came out, but it aged horribly, so horribly that it evolved from a classic horror movie to a comedy film. And with that, Luke, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so I saw this movie for the first time it's been about a month ago in preparation for one of my 5-minute movie reviews that I did around Halloween. So I do have a review for this movie if you want to go check that out. After you watch this video, stay here, of course. This is more important. But yeah, so I watched this movie for the first time about a month ago, and I came in with a lot of expectations. Like Ray said, obviously it's kind of touted as a classic horror film and very influential. And I do think it is very influential. I think this movie is pretty good overall. I don't love it, but I definitely don't hate it like Ray does. I think there is a lot to love in this movie. Getting past all of its flaws and its poorly written main group of teenage, or I guess they're we'll say they're in their 20s. They look a little too old to be teenagers, but the main group of people who are there to be killed, they don't have much personality to them. You can kind of just not ignore them. But I think other than those kind of poorly written characters, there's a lot to love in this movie. I think this is one of the best directed horror films that I've ever seen. You got Tobe Hooper behind the lens, who is an amazing director. He also made Poltergeist, which a lot of people think Steven Spielberg directed that, but no, Tobe Hooper did. Spielberg was just really involved in the production, and he's made a lot of several classic horror movies as well. He made one of the Gremlins sequels, which is not a classic horror movie, but it's a pretty bad movie. But anyway, I definitely think this was his best performance as a director. some of the it's funny because I say a lot that the camera work in a movie is like a character in and of itself. And I know it sounds like a cliche at this point because I've said it in several videos, but I want to stress here, I'm not just saying that. Like the camera work in this movie is spectacular. This movie is an exercise in tension and an exercise in dread and an exercise in just trying to creep out the audience. And between an amazing performance by the director and a really good performance by the cannibalistic family, I thought all of those actors did awesome in their roles. And I really think Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface kind of created this iconic character and gave like a really good and kind of like multi-layered performance. And he doesn't even say a word, which I think is pretty impressive. Also, I think this movie has one of the best endings to any horror movie I've ever seen. So overall, I mean, it has aged kind of bad, but and some of the characters aren't very well written at all. But looking past all that, there's a lot to love in this movie, like the stuff I just talked about. So with that being said, we can go ahead and move on. Tyler, if you'd like.
Sure.
Before we go, I have a question real quick. Luke, at the end of the movie, it's been a while since I've seen it. Like a semi truck shows up. I know that, and doesn't the semi trucks like save the girl?
Yeah, well, the semi truck shows up, and spoilers for the movie, everybody. Which is I figured that'd be obvious, but yeah. So semi truck shows up, and the driver like gets out to check on her, and he sees Leatherface swinging his chainsaw at her, and he's like, nope. So he takes off and gets out of there. And then like a pickup truck comes by and she hops in the back of the pickup truck and it drives away. So she does get rescued by a truck, just not the semi truck.
So the semi originally comes through and then just drives away.
Well, it comes through and the driver gets out and he sees Leatherface and Leatherface like slashes at him and he gets freaked out and runs away. And the last time you see the semi truck driver, he's just running away, which is pretty funny. Which I don't think that's a bad thing. I think Tobe Hooper also, real quick, just to kind of get off topic for a brief second, Tobe Hooper also made the sequel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which came out like 11 years after this one in the 80s. And it's a dark comedy. And I actually think it's pretty funny and a little underrated. And I think there's a little subtle bits of comedy that was intentional. I know Ray and his friends were laughing at the movie, but there's some intentional comedy in here by Tobe Hooper. And it's really funny when the semi-truck driver is just like, nope. He's like checking her. He's like, oh, what's wrong? And he sees Leatherface. He's like, no, I'm out, and just takes off. So, but yeah.
I specifically remember laughing at the ending.
See, that part was funny. Now, the last couple seconds of the movie, I think is like breathtaking, but I'd like to talk about that later. But yeah, so the semi-truck doesn't save her, but a pickup truck does.
Well, Luke, you want to talk about it later? Do you want to go ahead and talk about the writing? And you want to start since Ray started the opening argument?
Sure. So, like I said, everything that this movie's trying to accomplish is kind of primarily done through other things besides the writing. I will say the writing is probably the weakest aspect of the movie just because like the central group of characters who are being preyed upon by Leatherface and this family are, just kind of, they're not really characters. They're just kind of bodies there to be killed. So the characters aren't really well written, and normally that would be a flaw. But to me, I don't really think so because that's not what this movie was going for. This movie literally just presented these people to be killed. Now, in a lot of movies, they try to get you to care about the characters, but the writing is bad for the characters, so we don't. In this movie, Tobe Hooper's like, I just want to gross people out with amazing direction, haunting imagery, kind of not a whole lot of music, a little bit of subtle music here and there, but yeah, so well-written characters wasn't the intention of this movie, so therefore I don't really think it's a flaw for the movie. And yeah, I'm all about well-written characters, but I'll make an exception in this case because everything else is done so well that I can kind of overlook that. But there are all kinds of moments in this movie that are just iconic. I love how it starts off with a narration that you can see the narration written on the screen, and it's a guy reading a text. And it's very unsettling. It's just like a normal guy reading something, and there's no creepy music backing it. But Tobe Hooper actually wrote that opening monologue for the guy to read. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But it just it's basically saying this movie's based on true events, which, it's inspired by the serial killer Ed Gein, who would skin people and make like clothing out of their skin, which is super messed up. But there's not like a family like this. Like it's loosely based on a serial killer. It's not based on a true story. But with that being said, it really just sets the tone for the movie. And what were you saying?
Is it Ed Gein or Ed Gein?
I thought it was Ed Gein.
I don't actually know. I'll take your word for it.
I could be wrong, I guess, but I mean, I don't know.
I'll take your word for it.
I thought it was Ed Gein, but yeah.
Continue.
But yeah. So the opening narration, and it's not very long. It's like less than a minute long. It just completely sets the stage, and I think that's a really great way to kick off the movie. Not a lot of movies kind of start off with a text scroll, other than obviously Star Wars, but it's kind of cool to see a movie like this start off like that. And with there's no big cue of music to freak anybody out. Like, it's just, from the opening shot, you can tell exactly what this movie's trying to be. It's just trying to freak you out and make you feel just nasty. I don't know if I unfortunately was eating something when I watched this movie for the first time, and that was a mistake because it's just gross. And I got sick. I lost my appetite pretty quick. But yeah, so while the main group of characters aren't very well written, I really like the writing of the family, in particular Leatherface, who's just like iconic at this point. And it's funny that like such a sensationalized kind of horror icon started from this movie, because in this movie he's very intimidating, obviously, because he's a very large man with a chainsaw wearing people's skin on his face. But aside from that, it's weird. He's not a sympathetic character, but I like how the movie kind of toys with the fact that he's not doing these things because he wants to. He's doing these things because his family is forcing him to, right? He basically does all the dirty work, and the family kind of just gets to kind of bask in everything he does. And, you know, they're not very nice to him. They treat him like crap. And it's weird. It makes you feel bad for him. There's a shot that kind of pans in of just Leatherface, and Gunnar Hansen does a great job, and you can only see his eyes and his mouth because he's wearing the mask. And you can just tell from that shot that he's got such a childlike innocence to him, and even though he's doing these horrific things. And I really like how he's written. I really like the fact that, you know, you don't know whether you should be like, oh, he's being manipulated by his family, or holy crap, he's murdering all these people. He's horrible. I'm sure of both. So I really love the fact that Tobe Hooper created this character and wrote him to be kind of like multi-layered. And, you know, obviously when we think of Leatherface, we just think of like typical slasher villain, and he becomes that in the sequels, which aren't as good, but really interesting villain. This is definitely one of the best written horror villains in a movie. Obviously there's cooler ones just because Jason Voorhees is cool. He's got the giant machete, and Freddy, obviously. But if you want to just talk about like well-written and well-crafted horror villains, then I think Leatherface is up there. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie is when this group of kids, they're driving in their van and they pick up a hitchhiker who we find out way later in the movie is a member of the family. And I just love how they're not a ton. It's almost like an exposition scene, because he's talking about where his family used to work at, like a meat processing plant. And he's showing them all pictures. And I love how no music accompanies this. In a horror movie today, you would hear people going like, when someone's saying things that are kind of menacing and kind of strange, you would hear like a very kind of, not really ambient, but just freaky music in the background. And it would really kill the tension of the scene. It'd be really cliche and overplayed. But I love the fact that like there's very minimal music at all in this movie. There's a theme, which is really good, but for the most part, there's like not like a ton of music in this movie. And some of the most horrific scenes don't have any music. And I think that's really awesome. Tobe Hooper also is really good at crafting this cannibalistic family. And it's funny because you don't see all of them together for very long. There's like this movie kind of builds. You hear a lot of people say that there's some movies that are kind of a build up to the end, to the last like 15, 20 minutes or so. And this movie is definitely that. You know, it's kind of slow getting started, and it gradually picks up the pace and stuff happens. And then boom, all of a sudden there's this giant horrific dinner scene where poor Sally is just tied down and being tormented by this family. And I love like little subtle lines of dialogue between them. And it's funny to call it subtle because they're just yelling and screaming across the room. But you learn so much about this family in such like a limited amount of time. And I think that's really impressive that he was able to get out information to the audience, but not make us feel like, oh, he thinks we're dumb. He thinks we won't understand things. So he's just having the characters explain it to us. Like it's just done in it's done in a way that's just so well executed. It's funny that like he put so much care and attention into writing and creating like this family of cannibals, and Leatherface is a really interesting villain that you don't always know how to feel about, which makes him complex, which I love. And the human characters, and like I said, or I say human, they're all humans, but the main group of like 20-year-olds that are there to be killed, yeah, they're super boring. Sally Hardesty is like probably like the first horror final girl of all time. Maybe not the first, but one of them. Like she's very like when you think of original final girls in a horror movie, she kind of kicked off that trend. But yeah, she's not very well written. She's just kind of like a girl that we're supposed to like, the girl who kind of gets out at the end. But yeah, so what he lacks in a writing for his main characters, he more than makes up for with his just awesome writing for the villains in the movie. So there's not like a ton to say about the writing. I have a lot more to say about the directing and the acting, because I think directing in particular is more the focus of the movie, the way it makes you feel, the atmosphere. But yeah, Tobe Hooper, it's a pretty well written movie, and I think Tobe Hooper and Kim Hinkle, who produced it, also co-wrote it with him. They both did a good job. So yeah, I think it's pretty well written.
All right, and Ray, we'll have your writing argument now.
So yeah, I obviously don't believe that this movie is well written. I believe I do have more problems with the directing and the acting than I do the writing. I mean, everybody knows I'm not very good in the writing rounds, but I think what I'll have to say about the writing will be effective enough. My problem with the writing in this movie is that every line seems so generic. Seems like a line like that would be delivered by a Disney Channel actor, but they're all in this stupid horror movie. And as Luke said, all the characters are written very bad, and none of the characters in this movie have any backstory to them at all, and you don't get to, whenever you're going through a character's backstory, that's when you learn to like root for that main character and like form like a bond, I guess, with them, even though like you're not there, you're just watching the movie. You're forming a lot of love for the character, but we don't get to see any of that with these characters in this movie. And when you don't get to form that love for the character, you don't find yourself rooting for them later on in the movie. You find yourself laughing at them, like I did. I found it funny at the end, watching them run from the villains in this movie, especially at the end whenever the semi truck shows up and sees Leatherface and then runs away. I thought that was all stupid. Like at that point, I was just wanting them to wrap it up, just save the girl in the semi and then end it. Why make another truck have to come through? It was that seemed very pointless to me. But yeah, and another thing I have with it is that at times it's super unrealistic. I would say even though it's based on a true story, I wanted it to be a little more like look a little more like a true story. But the villains in the movie, they're really like, it looks like they're slow with their attacks, and they're like giving the good guy plenty of time to run away. Or I know it's an older movie, but I still feel like it could have been a little more realistic. And that's my problem with the writing.
All right. Anyone have anything else to say for the writing round?
No, I'm good, I think.
All right. In that case, we're going to move right on to the directing. And Ray, since Luke started the last round, would you like to begin with the directing?
So my problem with the directing in this movie is that a lot of the shots feel like they're just randomly strung together. They're always at these random, spots in the movie. They're in the beginning, they're on a road trip to go to Which house were they going to? Whose house was it that they were going to, Luke?
Well, I thought they were going to visit like family of Sally and Franklin's. I think that's what I thought. I could be wrong. Like I was saying in the writing round, and I think Ray will agree with me on this. I don't even remember where they were going, but I'm pretty sure if I was to guess, they were going to see Sally and Franklin's family.
And where they end up at is this random abandoned house. There's no furniture. It's really like old and broke down. And then, just right down the hill from it's where the killer's house is at. And it's just such an easy cop out. Like, I know that's probably more writing. I should have maybe thought about that more than I said it, but like, it goes back to the shot, like the shots being randomly strung together. Like I was saying before, like we're just randomly going from this one house and randomly going down to the next one. Very luckily for the story that the characters are in this place at this time. I don't know. My problem with the directing is this, it just seems like it could be a little confusing at times, maybe like characters just randomly going off, doing their own thing for like just no reason at all. They're just going off doing it. And then the other characters follow in behind them, don't realize anything's up, and make the same stupid mistakes the other characters make. But that's all I have to say with the directing, I think. I think I got my arguments mixed up. I think the directing, or what did I say? I said I have more problems with the directing and acting. I have more problems with the writing and acting than I do directing, I should say. But yeah, I'll turn it over to Luke.
Okay, so see, I was totally mesmerized by the directing of this movie. I know it sounds like dumb to say, but I mean, I'm serious. I mean, I was blown away from like the first shot after we get that opening text scroll. It's just like the shot of, and it's not of our main characters or anything. It's a shot of like this kind of grotesque, like freaky looking thing. It's kind of strung up like a scarecrow, and the camera starts right on its face. And it's like a very slow, I mean, it's a couple minutes long shot of just the shot like slowly backing up. And I know it sounds kind of boring for people who aren't really into film, but I mean, it's just so well done. And there's nothing like bombastic about it. It's just like you're watching and you're like, oh gosh, you don't know what it is, but it's kind of giving you like a pit in your stomach and making you feel weird. I'm just going to gush about, I could talk about this all night, but I don't want to because we're on a little bit of a time crunch. So I'm going to talk about some of my favorite shots in the movie and well-directed moments. I love the shot of, and I didn't see the unrated version. I saw the original one, which I think had like an X rating, but it got changed back down to an R. So the actress wasn't naked in the scene. But it's one of the female characters is going to find her boyfriend and she doesn't know where he went. So there's a slow shot of her, and it's of her walking up, and the camera's kind of following her as she's walking up to this house. And it just fills you with a lot of dread. You know that bad stuff is going to happen if she goes to the house, but it's like you know what's going to happen, and the camera work is not making you feel any less scared about what's about to happen. Again, Tobe Hooper is just masterful at this, at creating moods with directing as opposed to writing. He's definitely more of a visual director and not so much of like a story-based director. He's a good writer, but I think his strength is definitely in creating atmospheres by directing. And also, I mean, who can not watch this movie and talk about the dinner scene at the end of the movie or near the end? It's like the climax of the movie. And it's just so frantic. And like all these people are in this hot room that you can just tell is hot because they're all just drenched in sweat. And Sally's just being tormented. It's like 15 minutes of her being tormented. So trigger warning, but they're not like, I mean, they're not doing anything like obscene to her, like just horrible, but they are treating her very badly. And they're basically just tormenting her through like verbal abuse and stuff like that. But she is just completely petrified in this scene. And the best shot in this whole scene is this close up it's right on her eyeball of her eyes moving back and forth really quick, like just panicked eyes. No music behind it, just that shot of her eyes moving back and forth. And you can just, I mean, it's just, it makes your skin crawl. It just, I mean, like I said, the camera work in this movie is like is like its own character. Also, I really want to talk about the lighting in this movie. Now, this movie was shot purposely to look gritty and gross. And if you watch it, you might think, oh, well, it's a 70s movie, so it looks bad. But no, there's most of the movies that came out in the 70s, at least with, I guess, with a little bit bigger budget than this, because this is very low budget, but they look better than this movie. This movie was purposely made, not just because of the low budget, but Tobe Hooper kind of took advantage of the low budget and decided to just go all in and purposely make it look gross and gritty. And the ending of this movie, I didn't talk about in the writing round because I thought, again, like most of this movie, writing is not its strength. I think the directing is. So Sally finally gets away from Leatherface, hops in the back of that truck. That shot of her just kind of like, you can't tell if she's like crying, yelling, or yelling in like victory, or just like in anguish. She's just kind of screaming as the truck's driving away. And then there's this shot and there's no music. And the last shot of the movie is just Leatherface, just like super mad that she got away. And he's just no music accompanying this at all. Again, that's why it's amazing, because just show me crazy stuff on the screen. I don't need modern movies. Take a page, take a cue from this. Don't just play music and expect me to be scared, right? I can be scared without loud jump scare music. But he's flinging his chainsaw around and spinning around and just like this kind of, it's almost like this, it's not really a dance, but I've heard it called a dance by some people, but he's just swinging the chainsaw around mad, and then like hard cut to black and the movie ends. And I mean, it's just awesome. It's just great stuff. It makes you forget how kind of poorly written the main characters in the movie were and how they're very not interesting at all. But that doesn't even matter to me, because that's not the point of this movie. The point is to freak you out and make you feel disgusted. And it totally succeeds in that. And that's like 100% because of the acting of most of the actors being very good and Tobe Hooper's direction. And like I've talked about for the past several minutes, I think his directing is flawless in this movie. Yeah, I mean, I can't praise it enough, I don't think. But yeah, I can't praise it enough, but that is enough. That's all I'm going to say about it. So yeah.
Luke, I'll be honest. You definitely got me that round.
That's up to Tyler.
Yes, it is. And in order to make my final judgment, we do need to move on to the acting. And Luke, I believe it's your turn again.
Yes. So the acting in this movie overall is really good, I think. Some people, I know Ray probably disagrees with me. Now, again, the acting of our main group of protagonists, it's not very strong. Marilyn Burns is a good actress, but this was one of her first movies as as Sally Hardesty, and she is just not very good. But I don't want to harp too much on that, because I want to talk about the good stuff. First off, Gunnar Hansen, who plays Leatherface, and unfortunately didn't come back for any of the sequels, and I think he actually died a couple of years ago, so rest in peace. But I think he's fantastic in this movie. This was like his first movie role. He mainly worked as a stuntman. Normally, people who play horror characters kind of work in stunts mainly. That's mainly what they do, because they don't have to talk much. You know what I mean? Like Kane Hodder played Jason, and he's awesome, but he didn't have to say much. Same here. You can see all the depth and all of his emotions just through the eye slits on his mask, and just like his childlike demeanor. But at the same time, he can also just be so terrifying at a moment's notice. And I think that's a lot of credit to the acting. People don't talk about his performance in this movie as much as they should. I think he's really good. Also, I'm sure Ray probably thought this was funny. I've heard several people think it's funny, but I think it's actually really good and freaked me out, legit freaked me out, and just gave me the willies. I think that the hitchhiker they pick up, I can't remember that actor's name, but I thought he did a really good job, the way he just twitches and he just freaks you out. It's just, he does a really good job. Again, these are like mainly first-time actors, and I was pretty impressed. All of the actors in like the Cannibal family were really good. Jim Seedow played like the head of the family. Drayton Sawyer is the guy's name. We don't find that out until a couple of movies later, but he plays like the head of the family, and he is just really creepy and just disgusting, and just does a great job. He was literally the only experienced actor. Fun fact, the only experienced actor professionally to be in like major productions in this movie, which makes sense because her budget was so small. But he's great. Again, all the cannibalistic family members are really good. And I will give Marilyn Burns some credit. She does a good job showing Sally be pretty freaked out and disturbed near the end of the movie. For most of the movie, her kind of just meandering around. Her line delivery was so, but near the end, her emotion really capped it off for me. So I think overall it's an okay performance from her, but the spotlight should definitely be on the family and Gunnar Hansen as Leatherface in particular. I think the acting is good in this movie for the most part. So yeah, I really like the acting.
All right, Ray.
So, I, however, think the acting is probably the worst part of this movie. There's not even really a lot I can say about the acting. Actors for this movie, like the main characters, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like I think they're just. Luke said this before. They're first time actors. I think they really just went and picked these people up off the street, and the entire time, like I was watching it, their line delivery just it bugged me. It felt like I was watching a Disney Channel show, and the main characters were saying like something so obvious. What, like, I don't know how to like make an example of it, but like, you know how like in a Disney Channel show, a character will say something and the other character is not supposed to know, like they're supposed to be hiding it or something, and then it's so obvious to the audience that what's happening. Like the line delivery felt like that, or like a better example would be like it felt like they were reading like a newsman would read. It felt like they were reading their lines off of a screen, and the line delivery just wasn't there for me. And Luke's argument for the acting was, in the beginning of his argument, was that the main characters aren't very well acted. He did say that, but the villains make up for it. And to me, I don't think that they do. Like, I don't think the villains give good performances. Sure, the villains may like have. I think that the villains have cool designs. You know, they're built to look scary, but like they're just they don't. There's not really any line delivery there. We don't really get to see any of their facial expressions because they have masks on the whole time. And I don't. They didn't. I like. Correct me if I'm wrong. Was there really much line delivery at all from the villains in this movie?
See, there wasn't until the end, and I don't think that's like a negative. I think that their physical acting kind of made up for it.
You mean like just like the way they like moved their bodies?
It's the way they
and stuff?
moved, and like, yeah. I don't. I mean, just like harassing Sally and stuff, and just
To me, the movement was off. Like I
Really?
felt like it was a little over the top. You know what I mean? Like I felt like they were overdoing it.
Really? Okay.
And that was my problem with the villains of the movie. Like especially at the end when he's like flinging the chainsaw around like an idiot in the road. We're like,
Oh, come on, dude! That scene's awesome.
me and my friends were just sitting and laughing at it, and I don't know. I think the villains don't make up for the main actors, and the main actors are just terrible in themselves. And I think even Luke can admit that. But yeah, I'm ready to move into the closing argument whenever.
All right. And Ray, that is going to be you again for the closing argument, if you'd like to start.
So yeah, Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a movie that I went into hoping to maybe get to see a very classic horror movie on the big screen. And I was very disappointed by this movie. And that is in part to the very unrealistic writing and poor line delivery from the cast, and the fact that the cast was just picked up off of the street. You know, they had a really great idea, a great original story, true story even. You know, that makes it even more scarier. Whenever I see a scary movie that's based on a true story, it freaks me out a little more. But, you know, this movie didn't scare me at all. I never would be scared of this situation to happen to me ever in my life. So therefore, you know, it can't scare me because, you know, I don't ever feel like this would ever happen to me. And the villains are just so overdone and over the top in their acting and the way that they're written to act. And I don't know, it's just not I was very disappointed by this movie, and I know they've done it, remade it, and I think I've been told that the remakes are a little better, but it's a very good story idea concept for a movie, but I just don't think it was executed well. And I'll turn it over to Luke.
Yeah, so I pretty much disagree with Ray. Mostly, I figured everybody knew that by now. But to me, this movie, it feels so different from your typical horror movie. I think that's one of the reasons I love it. And it's preserved in the Library of Congress. It's like it's considered monumental in horror, but I really just think this movie is a masterclass in directing. And I think it's basically an example for maybe people in film school or anybody looking to be a director and kind of create films. I just feel like they should basically watch this movie and essentially see how you create atmosphere through minimal dialogue and hardly any musical score. And I think this movie, what it's trying to do, which is not to have very well written characters, but to just place some people in this horrible situation and to just creep you out, make you feel dread, make you feel just gross and disgusting. I think it completely succeeds at it. There are some things holding it back from being a great movie, but it's still one that I really highly recommend you check out. Like I can't talk about the directing in this movie enough. It's fantastic directing. I've already said a ton about that, but the acting in this movie, for the most part, I think is really good. The villainous characters are pretty good in particular. And Ray mentioned that you can't hardly see their faces. And to me, that's almost, like I said, with Leatherface, he's wearing a mask the whole time as well. And to me, it makes the acting more impressive when you can kind of see their performances shine through that. You don't really have to see their face. I think that's more of a plus to me. But yeah, I think the acting in this movie from the villainous characters is really good. Gunnar Hansen is just really awesome in this movie. I wish he had more film roles. Sadly, he did pass away, like I mentioned, but he was really good in the movie. This movie is just definitely one I recommend you check out. And it's funny. I mean, this movie, the sequels turn it into just your typical horror schlock, right? This movie is not that at all. Like the way it's shot and elements of this movie that are just weird and bizarre, and the way it's crafted, and I've heard people say this before, it belongs more in an art house film theater than just like a regular theater to me. Like this definitely seems more very artistic, and it has some things to say, and it kind of makes you think. And it's amazing that a movie that has such a simple idea and you don't know much about really what's going on throughout most of the movie, it can make you think in so many different ways, and it can have such a deep effect on you. And it has this effect on me, and I didn't even love the movie. I think it's just pretty good. So I can't even imagine what someone who just adores this movie, who thinks it's like their favorite horror movie, would say about this movie. But I really do enjoy the film. I highly recommend you check it out. If you want to watch a movie that's just bare knuckle, gritty, makes you feel gross, if that's your type of thing, if you want to feel creeped out, don't watch any of the crappy Saw movies. Don't waste your time on those torture porn movies like Hostel and stuff like that. Check this movie out. A movie that is very artistic, but also very simple at the same time. So I definitely recommend it. That's my closing argument.
All right, Tyler, give it to us.
All right.
Let us hear it.
I do have a winner. So we are going to break it down by round. So for the opening argument, I'm going to give it to Ray. I believe that Ray's story about going into the theater, having never seen it, and being filled with other people as well, some who have seen it, some have not, and then just laughing about it, not being scared at all. I think that really lended credence to his argument in that round. So the opening argument does go to Ray. The next 4 rounds, however, go to Luke.
Yes.
Oh, no.
Yes.
We snagged one of them.
You did snag one. You snagged the first round.
I met one other one. I knew I had the first round, but
Tyler, would you still continue to break it down for us?
Yeah, I'd love to. So for the writing round, Luke had a lot to say, and Ray, I think you kind of got confused on your arguments in this round because you said you didn't really have a lot to say in the writing, and you focused more on the directing and the acting. But in the directing round, you did focus a lot more on the writing, and then you kind of confused saying it's the writing and the acting you mean. And then in the acting round, I think it was just Luke had just more points in favor of his arguments for the writing round, and then the closing argument was, of course, just a summary of.
Okay, now Tyler, have you seen the acting in this movie?
I have. Yeah, I have.
It's really bad. It's terrible.
I don't think it's awful. It's okay.
I think it's probably some of the worst acting I've ever seen.
What?
I'm not exaggerating.
Have you seen The Room?
Nothing right now matters, but I still am gonna. Luke, you did change my mind on one thing. The dinner scene. The dinner scene was okay. I'll give you that. You did change my mind on that because thinking back on it, I was like, that is a pretty creepy scene. Yeah, a little bit.
It's the best scene in the movie for sure.
Right, but we do have a story time today. But before we get into that, we are going to go to sponsor break. Right. So again, me and Ray are going to co-opt this story today because this happened and we were both involved. Now Ray thinks it'll be funnier from his perspective. So I'm going to let Ray tell most of it, and I'll chip in when needed. So Ray, what happened?
So I think the story's funniest from my perspective because the two of my coworkers were mad in this situation, and they were arguing with this customer, and I got to just sit back and absorb it all and watch it all. So it's Friday. Was this Friday, Tyler? No, Saturday. It's Saturday night. Kyle of the 10 movie theater. Tyler and I are in the theater doing our thing, working, that's what we do, chilling. And we get this family that comes in. It's a wife and a kid who both have their masks on, and another guy with them who I will just say this, because it makes it a little funnier. The guy has a mullet. Tyler did clown on him for having a mullet.
Okay. And can I just interject here?
Yeah. This is why it's a co-op story. So, interject all you want.
So I've worked in customer service throughout the entirety of the COVID-19 pandemic, and there are a few trends I have noticed. One of these trends is that if there's a family and one person does not have a mask on, it is always the dad. We may get some individual women come up that don't have a mask on, but if they are in a family, it is always the dad. I have never once served a family where they all had masks except one person, and the one person was the mom. It has never happened to me. It is always the dad.
I could see that for sure.
Yeah.
I could see it being the dad.
Yeah. And I've always just wondered what conversations go on for all of you to decide to wear a mask except one person. What happens? But anyway, Ray, continue.
He walks in, and normally I would be behind the counter with Tyler, but on this night I was an usher, so I was standing over at the podium, guiding people to their theaters, cleaning and whatnot. But I was standing over at the podium with one of my friends. His name is Scene. His name's actually not Scene, but I call him Scene. I gave him that nickname. And we see this guy giving Tyler and the other concessionists problems, and Scene looks at me. He's like, "Hey, someone's up there giving him problems." And Scene and I walk up to the stand, for backup, and then the guy's leaving, and the family's leaving. And we're like, "Oh, Tyler took care of it." And we walk up there, and Tyler and the fellow concessionists are like, "Yeah, we just got cussed out bad by that guy." and Tyler, I'll let you maybe give the people an idea of what he said, because I wasn't up there, obviously.
Yeah, so we informed this guy that he had to have a mask on. We asked if he had one. They did not. And then he just kept trying to he's kind of like saying like, nope, nope, nope. And I was like, you have to have a mask on. And, it's guidelines. Like, you can get shut down, lose movies and everything. You don't have one on. You have to follow them guidelines. And he just keeps going like, nope, nope, nope. And his wife's trying to, she's like, we already have tickets. And I'm like, I'll give you your money back then. You aren't seeing a movie here. I said, you have to have your mask on to go see the movie. And then he's like trying to like brandishing his phone everywhere. He's like, dude, we already bought the tickets. Just sell me the tickets and there'll be no problem. And I said, I'm not selling you anything unless you put the mask on. I said, it's the guidelines that we all have to follow. He's like, you all may have to follow them, but I don't have to follow them. It is not in the Constitution. It's not a law. I was like, well, if you don't want to follow the guidelines, I will give you your money back and you all can leave. You are not watching a movie here. And they kept trying to go back and forth. He starts cussing me out and all this. His wife's like, can we just have the money back? I was like, yes, you can have the money back. So I gave them the money back and then they left, which brings us to where Ray is. Ray, do you want to cut on this next part or do you want me to?
Yeah, so I can, you can, it doesn't matter.
Let's go back to you.
Okay, so we'll go back to me for just a split second. Cena and I walk up, see what's happening. We get the breakdown, we're talking about it. The guy walks back in, and all of us just go silent. And we all look at the guy.
It's literally like a scene from the movie where, like, you have your people talking, and then something happens, and then they all just, like, slowly turn in the direction of what happened.
It was literally that. And then Cena and I walk back over to the podium, and we let Tyler deal with this again. We'll go back to you, Tyler.
So, I pride myself on being fairly patient when people are yelling at me. I feel like I'm a pretty nice person. I don't like to, make anyone's day bad. I don't like to insult people or anything like that. But this guy, he drove me up a wall, man. They walked in, and lo and behold, a mask has magically appeared out of thin air. But he is holding it in front of his face. He's not wearing it. And this just kind of like increases my blood pressure and my rage just to a point where I'm just done. So before he even gets like halfway up to the concession, I turned our mic on. I said, dude, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. I said, put it on or get out. You have your money on, like you have your money back, put the mask on or get out. And they come back up and they were trying to buy tickets again. And I said, I'm not selling you anything until you put the mask on. And he is trying to tell me, he says, oh, I have it on. And I said, no, you don't. Put it on your ear or you're not getting anything. Put the mask on or get out. And he does put it on and they pay, right? They do pay. They get their popcorn and stuff. And we're all perfectly cordial to them after he puts the mask on. Now, Ray, back to you.
So from the concession stand, they walk over to the podium towards Cena and I. And I don't have to say anything in this situation because Cena is literally like the mask sheriff of our county. Literally. Like if you have your mask under your nose, and Cena's around, you're pulling that son of a gun above your nose. So from the concession stand, this guy takes off his mask and walks towards us. Cena says, hey, buddy, Cena's always super nice, too, about it. He's always like, we just ask that you guys wear masks, in the hallways and in the lobby, yada, yada, yada. And Cena tells this guy, we just ask that you wear masks in the building. And the guy just ducks into the bathroom, doesn't say anything. So at this point, my good friend Cena's over at the podium, fists clenched, breathing as hard as, breathing very heavily. The guy comes out of the bathroom. I think he has the mask on, but it's not above his nose. He's obviously, not wearing it right. And she puts her popcorn on the podium, starts looking for tickets. I'm just like, this is the first time I've even spoke to him. I'm like, y'all watching the Croods? Second one on the right. That's all I said to him, literally, the whole time. They start walking towards the movie, and Cena's like, in a very, smart aleck-like way, he's like, thanks for coming to our theater. And the guy's like, yeah, well, I'm not real happy about being here. And Scene goes, buddy, it's really not that hard. It's just a mask. Like, and then the guy's wife then chimes in and says, can we just not do this right now? Can we just not, as they're walking into their theater. And then the guy looks at his wife and he's like, don't worry, honey, I'll get him on the way out.
Uh-oh.
And in my mind, I'm like, I know he's not talking about Scene. Like, this guy's not going to try.
Sorry.
He's not going to try Scene. Like,
he will suplex. Scene will suplex you in a moment's notice.
Scene is a big man, and you don't want to mess with Scene.
So Luke, for context, since you weren't here, this guy was smaller than me.
Are you serious?
Yeah, like in height and width.
Man, he would be watching The Croods too, wouldn't he? Who the heck wants to watch that? I mean, go and watch it so you can support theaters. Go and watch it, but like, I mean, come on.
I mean, he had his like 4 or 5-year-old kid with him.
That's even worse. He's exposing them to that garbage. Sorry, I don't like The Croods very much.
Man, Luke's very obviously anti-crude here.
So from here, they walk in the theater, and I go and tell Tyler's in the break room. He got pizza, and he didn't eat any of it.
Tyler's in the break room fuming.
And as I walk over to the podium, go ahead, Tyler.
Luke, I was so mad, I was shaking, like literally, like involuntarily, my body was just shaking from anger.
I heard Tyler yell for one of the first times.
Oh, I was straight yelling. Like, as soon as the dude left, I was yelling at him.
Gosh. Well, I knew it was serious when out of nowhere on Saturday night I get a text that said, I legit just about cussed out a cuss. You literally texted me that, and I was like, oh, shoot. So when you all said a minute ago that you had a story time, I was like, I guarantee you it's about this guy. But screw this guy. Heck with him. But anyway, I want to hear from either of you guys what he did to follow up, because he said he's going to get him on the way out. So what did he do?
Scene got to him first. Basically, I go to talk to Tyler in the break room for a little bit, and I go to walk back towards the podium, and Scene's like nowhere to be found for 10 minutes. Like, I cannot, like, I don't know where Scene's at. And a couple minutes pass, and here comes Scene walking out of the theater that they're in. I'm like, what happened, Scene? He said, yeah, well, I just got done talking to that guy. We actually had a really good conversation, and we shook hands. And I won't really go into the conversation that Scene and the guy had, but I will say Scene did a number on the guy. The guy had his mask on when he left the theater, and it just goes to show that Scene this night was a bigger man than any of us were.
Yeah, that definitely ended better than if it just didn't. Like, if Scene didn't talk to him.
I thought it was going to end bad.
Oh, I did too. I thought Sean was going to have to put this guy through the wall or something. Like,
which I would have paid to have seen.
Yeah, I was getting kind of hype, honestly. Like, I'm kind of sad. I would have paid pay-per-view for that.
Heck yeah.
All right, but anyway, we hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Cinebros Podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe to us on YouTube if you haven't already. You can follow us on any of our social medias at CinebrosP on Twitter, Cinebros Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. And we have our own subreddit at r/Cinebros Podcast. Guys, anything else to say?
Make sure to also check out my 5-minute movie reviews, still going strong every Monday. And also every other Monday, we got Mando reviews talking about every episode of The Mandalorian Season 2. Every 2 episodes per video. So I'll talk about the first 2 in one video and so on and so forth. But yeah, make sure to check those out and follow me on Instagram at 5_minute_reviews or movie reviews. I'm sorry. So yeah, thanks for listening, guys. We appreciate it.
All right. And we will see you later. Bye.
See you guys.